Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Resiliency Redefined. I'm excited to be able to be with you in this moment, answering a question that someone shared with us. And let me tell you, I felt this question so deeply when it was just right to the point. It said, what do you do, Robyne, when you're trying to be resilient, but you just keep going in it? Like you're just going through it. Like life just seems to be throwing you curveball after curveball, and you are not feeling 100%. Things are happening to you that you did not sign up for, yet here you are trying to figure it out. Like, what do you do when you need to be resilient from your own life? And the person went on to say that they feel as though that they need a break from themselves. And oh my goodness, this like landed for me because I can just deeply recall what that felt like when I needed a break from my own life, where I needed a break from myself sometimes, even just that noise in your head sometimes, just needing some type of reprieve because our life and our stressors, it feels relentless. Like it just never lets up. So, my friends, that's what we're going to dive into in our time together right now. So, first off, when you feel as though the world in like you're being crushed by the weight of your world and your two hands are not strong enough to hold everything together, the big invitation for you here is first to recognize you are not alone. So often when we look at social media or chit chat with friends just in like transitions or even just like interactions brief, like, how are you? Good, fine, busy, tired, okay, right? We just kind of go through this surface often. And it sends the message, probably to a lot of us, that we think that everybody's doing pretty okay. Everybody's just busy, but like they seem to be handling their busy better than maybe you feel like you're handling your busy. I get that. The reality is you are absolutely not alone. If you notice that you're feeling just a wee bit sensitive to feeling like everybody else has it figured out and I don't know what I'm doing, first invitation, yes, you're not alone. And number two, minimize the blast radius of comparison. As soon as we start comparing ourselves to others, it is like it's instantly that we're going to have this downturn in our positive. Okay. And what I mean by that, as soon as we start looking at what other folks are achieving or doing or navigating or how tidy their pantry is or whatever that thing is that you're comparing yourself, or perhaps how busy they are, how many likes or followers they have, whatever that measuring stick of social comparison, that is not going to serve you well, especially when you're feeling a little bit vulnerable or a little bit overwhelmed. Now, the reason we do it, okay, so the reason why our brain goes to kind of that comparison mode, especially when we ought not to be comparing ourselves, is it feels under threat because our nervous system is activated. That nervous system, that fight, flight, freeze, and fawning is activated. So what it's doing is it's literally looking around everywhere to try and figure out where are the threats coming from. So it recognizes your body's feeling a little bit wobbly. And what it's then trying to do is take in data and be like, well, compared to this, compared to that, look at this. It's just trying to pinpoint exactly what it is that has you feeling this wobbly. But the reality, as you already know, it's often not just one thing. So we have this like free floating anxiety, this free flowing like overwhelm that's coming at us in all different directions. So our wee little brain is literally trying to figure out, okay, where are the leaks, so to speak, in my boat? And literally it's the boat's going down, but it doesn't even know where the water's coming in from. It's coming in from all different places. Okay, so recognize you're not alone. Recognize that our brain is going to compare as a way of trying to make sense of it. Because remember, we're natural born problem solvers and meaning makers, which means when we're feeling discomfort, we want to put a name on it as soon as possible. We want to identify, where is this coming from? So the social comparison pull or drive or impulse or urge, it's going to be really high. So we're going to want to minimize exposure. Okay. We're going to minimize the things that are more likely to make us feel bad about ourselves or put us in that state of comparison. The other piece that I would really encourage you to think about is that when you're feeling so overwhelmed and you don't feel like you have time to do those self care pieces that work, those are the times you need to double down and get really disciplined about doing them anyway. So as soon as you notice, I don't have time to go for a walk. I don't have time to pick up that call from my friend. I don't have time to sit and listen and hear about my loved one's day. Or I don't have enough time for this puppy snuggle. Like that's a travesty. But if you're feeling like I don't have time for this, try to do your best to notice that, catch it, and lean into it, knowing that this is when you need those things the most. And so often when I'm working with teams and groups, organizations, or even folks one on one, and they say, when things are really overwhelming, I find it like harder to stay disciplined. Again, that's when you need it the most. And you might notice it doesn't feel like it's working, right? Like you do a workout and then afterwards, like right away, you're back into a mood again. Or, you have that, take the time to, eat that snack and you eat that snack, but you're like, no, really, I should have eaten the nibs, right? Like, again, I appreciate that so often it doesn't feel like that stuff is working. Now, this is the next big idea. When we continue to do that self care or what I call self stewardship, because we have a responsibility to look after our bodies, our lives, our hearts. We have a responsibility to our loved ones and to, I believe, the world to take care of ourselves. That's why we call it self stewardship. When you feel like your self care, your self stewardship, like isn't working, it's probably a backstop, which means it might not be getting you farther ahead, but it's backstopping it so you don't get any worse. You don't get even more off course. You don't get even more overwhelmed. So think of the self care. If it's not improving the situation, it's a backstop, and we're going to keep doing it because it's not making it any worse and it's not letting it get any worse. I believe it was Ryan Holiday who said, for example, like, going for a walk doesn't solve your problems, but it often doesn't make them worse. And I just think that's so true. So thinking of our self-care when you're so busy and something has to give, and that feels like the first thing to give, I'm going to encourage you to lean into that commitment of saying, no, you know what? This is what I got to do to be able to feel okay and get back to good. So we're going to stay consistent. The other piece, an invitation I can offer you when you, again, feel like the world is just getting so complicated, simplify. When you're going through a lot, do less. Now, how do we simplify? Now, there's a practice we talk about in my program that's called the art of 100. And this is how it works. When you wake up in the morning, or maybe tomorrow morning, if you want to try tomorrow, you can put this into practice even for the rest of your day right now. Ask yourself, what energy level do I have out of 100? So maybe you're like 95. You are locked in, you're geared in, you're ready to level up, skill up. You feel so well resourced and solid. Amazing. You're at 95% capacity. Brilliant. Then you're going to give your day 95% of all of that good energy. Now, let's say instead, perhaps you're leaning a little bit closer to where perhaps I'm feeling right now, which is a solid like 60, right? About 60% at my capability. Then I'm going to give the world 60% today. I'm not going to give it 100 because I do not have 100 to give. I only have 60%. And already in that 60%, I'm giving it my all. That's what I have to give. So my 60 that day, that is my 100. And what the research shows, when we can get into what's called energy and task matching. So the energy I have is matching the tasks that I'm trying to do. And we can get into that, like linear kind of that more flow state where we're operating in that system. We bounce back quicker. We bounce back quicker when we can be honoring our energy levels with the task and the demands. Okay, so let's do like a little baby breath of a recap. First of all, notice you're not alone. Watch out for those tendencies or those pulls or those impulses for social media comparison or kind of looking at the, ways of the world and feeling like everybody else has this figured out. Not everybody has this figured out. We are literally all trying our best, doing our best to just manage what we're navigating on a daily basis. Again, recognize the self care might not feel like it's advancing the mood, but it's not making it worse. And it might be serving as a backstop. The next idea, again, honoring the energy that you have. When you have only 50% and you give 50%, that is your 100. Okay, so let's say you do pull up a 50%, 60% energy, and we know that if you're going through a lot, you want to do less. What do we let go of? What do we delegate? What do we put pause on? So I know it, there's this like tendency to be like, wow, Robin, I just imagine going into work tomorrow and telling my leader, hi, I only have 50% capacity. So I'm only doing 50% of my job today. I totally get that's not where we're going to probably make up a lot of the energy. So, where do we find space? Well, the first is we want to minimize decision making. Okay, we want to simplify where we can, which might mean, for example, taking that just 5 minutes, doing a little bit of meal prep so you don't have to try and decide what you are going to have for dinner at the end of a day when you don't have a lot of energy. Or maybe you choose that night, I'm going to have takeaway, right? You're just going to do takeaway so you don't even have to think about it. Or my favorite go to is breakfast for dinner. For some reason, breakfast things for dinner just seem to be so much easier to prepare. Now, here's another little tip. If you're going to do just a little bit of mental mapping for food, I sometimes appreciate giving myself some options, meaning like I might have A or B, right? So, and what I mean by that is instead of saying on Mondays, we will have this, and Tuesdays, we have that, I might just say, like, here are the five main meals for the week. And then I will just decide which one I feel like. But I know that I have like the ingredients that I could pull off those five meals. Because sometimes when I'm feeling super overwhelmed, I notice my protest behavior gets kicked in because I don't feel like anything. I don't, if I say, like, for example, Taco Tuesday and I'm in a mood, I'm going to be like, I'm going to rebel against wanting tacos on Tuesday simply because I'm trying to find a little bit of control and agency, especially when things feel out of control. So give yourself options, but not too many options that you even have that like analysis paralysis where you have too many choices so you can't pick anything. Okay, I hope you're following along. Now, tiny wee digression about the whole breakfast for dinner things. I recall Jax coming home when he was like, I think in grade one. Oh, and he was cheesed with me. He was so ticked. And I'm like, dude, what is wrong? And he's like, Mom, you like lied to me. And I was like, wow, Jackson, that's a really big statement. Can you tell me a little bit more? And he said, because of you, I got my homework wrong. You gave me the wrong information. Well, first of all, small caveat, I probably wasn't doing a grade one's homework. I'm not sure where this was coming from, but I recognized, he was in this big feeling. So I want to show up for him. And of course, Jackson, tell me a little bit more. Help me understand where you're coming from. I want to fix this. I want to work with you. Help me understand. And he pulled out this like little sheet of paper. And the activity that children had to do was like cut out all of these food groups, like all these food, sorry, cut out all these like pictures of food from different food groups and then put them in categories. So like breakfast items, snack items, lunch items, and dinner items. And Jax was so cheesed with me because he had all of these breakfast items in the column for dinner and he got it marked wrong. So he was so upset with me because he got all this marked wrong and he's like, you're doing this grown-up thing wrong. Brother, preach. Let me tell you, I do have moments where I think I am. But again, sometimes we were having a lot of breakfast for dinner when he was little because it was simple. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's also the same idea about, I recall in that same lesson, he must have been doing nutrition. He came in and said, we're only supposed to eat naked vegetables and you don't make naked vegetables. And I was like, Jackson, I don't even know what a naked vegetable is. And he's like, you're not supposed to have your veggies with like all the stuff we put on them. And I'm like, well, Jax, what do we put on them? And he's like, the dip and the hummus and vegetables are supposed to be served naked with no butter. And I had this moment where I looked at that little dude. I said, Jax, I think carrots taste better when you eat them with dip. Do you think they taste better when you eat them with dip? He said, well, yes, I do. And if you might recall an earlier podcast with Jackson the carrots, this is a big deal. Some days he likes carrots, some days he does not like carrots. Anyway, so in that moment, I said, Jax, your vegetables are allowed to taste good. Like you're allowed to like eat vegetables with dip if that's how you're going to eat them. And again, it was just this moment where he's like, that's not what the teacher said. Breathe. Okay. I was doing my best. Okay. And to you as a grown up, if you like, oh, you're supposed to eat nickel vegetables. If the decision is, am I going to eat a vegetable or not eat a vegetable, and you choose to eat it with hummus, eat your vegetables with hummus. I'm not a nutritionist, but let me tell you, I don't think there's any rule that says we have to always eat naked vegetables. That's just my opinion. Maybe my soapbox. Okay. Getting back to the world is really heavy. Simplify where you can. Do takeaway, breakfast for dinner, any way that you can simplify things. Other one could even be having a couple go-to outfits. Anything that literally makes you having to make decisions, make fewer decisions, which means when you might be feeling like in a mood, then you just wear that one thing that you know, right? Maybe it's that black turtleneck and a pair of jeans, which I happen to be wearing right now. Like just simplify where when you don't feel like making a decision, just have my default settings. Okay. So I think of certain clothes, certain meals, certain things just as your default settings. Just go back to your default. You know they work and it's going to be enough to let you simplify to get through. I hope you're catching the point on this one. Now, the next idea I encourage you to think about, especially when things feel so heavy and overwhelming, is to make the invisible visible. We've talked about that before, which means you got to get it out of your head. Writing it on a post-it note, making a to-do list, using a whiteboard, like anything to try and get all of the stuff that you're trying to remember, getting it onto a piece of paper, getting it out of your head into something is also going to help, because sometimes when we look at it, we realize it's not that big or heavy, or maybe we realize it is actually that big and heavy, and perhaps I'm not meant to do this all by myself. I'm not meant to try and figure out this all by myself. So that's when we might ask for help. Maybe we delegate, or maybe we just decide that, you know what, this just isn't available to me right now. Right. And again, I recall when the kids were little, recognizing a clean house. What is that? Not in this season, but I could settle on a non-negotiable of having a clean kitchen. The clean kitchen, and when I would clean the kitchen at nighttime and turn the lights out, and I wish I had a little sign that said restaurant is closed, that just allowed me to sign off and start the day the next morning with like the kitchen set up to go, right? The rest of the house might have been a disaster, but I'm simplifying it because that is where it's going to make the next day easier. That's going to be a little bit of ease, a little bit of spaciousness there. Now, the last kind of suggestion that I would give you, if you're just so tired of managing all of it, is this idea about getting out of our head and getting into our body, taking our worries for a walk, not because we're trying to get 10,000 steps a day or because we're trying to do all this stuff. Literally, just get outside. Get into our body, create something, whether that be just kind of moving about, small puttering activities, just getting out of just the noise of our head into our bodies and just moving around can make the world of difference. That also ties into, as we've talked about before, the forces of recovery, solitude. I recall one time when A was little, she asked me if she could borrow something, and I was like, yeah, go for it. It's in my shower. And she came out afterwards and she said to me, she goes, Mama, why was there a coffee cup in the shower? And I said, that's where I had my coffee this morning. And she's like, oh my gosh, we were looking for you everywhere. And I'm like, I know. That's why I had my coffee in the shower, because sometimes we just need just a minute to catch our breath, to give us that little pep talk if we need to pep talk ourselves, to be our kindest coach, to be our encourager, our own cheerleader sometimes, just to take a deep breath and trust that this too will pass, that you are well resourced and you are capable and you can figure it out. Now, another force of recovery you can tie into there is music. Like maybe you turn on some like dirty 80s gangster rap. Maybe you turn on just whatever a soundtrack, something that just makes you feel something other than the overwhelm from all your thoughts, right? Listening to just big music. My like go-to right now, I have listened to this album so many times. It's the soundtrack of The Greatest Showman. Like I don't think you can listen to that soundtrack and not feel emboldened and empowered, right? So listening to it in the car, bringing music into your space can also help. Again, the one practice I'm going to encourage us today to think about as a sign off is the practice of gratitude. Again, another force of recovery. It's as simple as this. What you appreciate appreciates. What you appreciate will grow. And I get what in the world is just so chaotic and so much noise. And how am I ever going to find my through line? Taking that moment to slow down and instead of, counting all your worries, count your blessings. And that isn't like, this isn't just lip service. And I recall somebody once saying to me, Robin, I tried gratitude and it didn't work. My friends, if you really lean into gratitude, it will bring you to your knees when you realize you are so well looked after. Even if you don't feel it right now, you are so looked after. You will figure this out. Look at all of the things that you have navigated. Look at all the hard things that you have done. Look at all the great things that are ahead of you. Think of the great things in the past, but also what's on the horizon. Better days are ahead if you really lean into the practice of gratitude. Find the things that are working, appreciate the things that are working, appreciate that your body is even able to contain this big, beautiful, bold life that you're living. Lean into gratitude. It will bring you to your knees if you see how many miracles are around us each and every day. And so when it's really, really big, go small, be intentional, give yourself like just enormous amounts of grace and mercy and a dash of patience and trust that those better days are ahead. You are not alone. You will figure this out. And again, we don't have to try and do this by ourselves. So I hope that helps to my dear listener who said, when I'm tired of myself, what do I do? Simplify and recognize there is only one you. And as Dr. Wayne Dwyer says, you cannot fail at being yourself. So how you're showing up right now is just exactly where you are. It's exactly what you need to be doing. And so often the storms, they're actually clearing a path for that big, bright future that's waiting for you. So go get it. Take good care, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.